Since we're making Android apps, it would be really nice to have an Android device to test our applications on. So you may have a physical one in front of you, and in an upcoming video, I'll show you how you can hopefully use your physical device to run your apps. But if you don't have a physical device, don't worry. We can actually create virtual Android devices here in Android Studio. Android Studio comes with the Android Virtual Device, or AVD Manager, which we can use to create Android emulators that we can then run on a computer. Each emulator we create can simulate a particular type of Android device, like various phones or tablets, and they can run different versions of the Android software development kit. So like we could run Android 11 or Android 8 or Android 4.4 if we wanted to. Once we build these, we can run our apps on these emulators just like they're physical devices. Just a warning though, these emulators can take up a good amount of disk space and can kind of be resource intensive. So depending on your computer specs, take caution before you just start creating and running multiple devices. So we can find the AVD manager here under Tools and Tools AVD Manager. And what you'll be presented with is a list of virtual devices that you currently have. So you see, I currently have 4 different virtual devices. I have 3 phones, the Pixel 2, 3, and 4, and then a tablet here, the Pixel C. After this video, you might want to create a couple of different virtual devices. It's always good to test your app on different devices so you can see how the layout works and maybe different versions of Android. So I think for our purposes here, I'm primarily going to use a tablet, and I'll talk about why in an upcoming video. So I'm going to try to make a Pixel C here for you folks. So we're going to go to Create New Device, and when we come here, we're first presented with which type of device we want. We're going to really only concern ourselves with phones or tablets. So you can see for our phone, here's the Pixel 4, the 3, the 2. Let's go to tablet and let's create a Pixel C. And so let's click Next now. And essentially what we're going to do, that just created the device for us, but the device doesn't have any software or operating system installed on it. So we have to give the device a version of Android to run. And so you're going to have to download one of these versions of the Android operating system. So I downloaded the newest one, Android 11, which is R. You probably have a nice little download link here. You should click download. And that's going to take a little time. So while that's downloading, I suggest you pause the video. Okay, so hopefully you're back now. You've got the OS installed or downloaded. And so now let's install it to our device. We'll click Next here. We need to give our device a name, and I'm just going to keep the default name Pixel C API 30. And we're going to set the startup orientation here. I'm going to have it start up in portrait modes because that's how I like to use my tablets. And then we'll click Finish. I'm not going to click Finish because I already have this device made. You can click Finish, and then it should add the Pixel C to your list of virtual devices. So great, now that we have that, let's scroll over here to this Actions tab and let's look at some of the things we can do. We can launch the emulator, we can edit the emulator, and if we click here, we have a bunch of options. We can duplicate, wipe data, cold boot, etc. So these two right here, wipe data and cold boot, I really want to talk about. Sometimes the virtual emulators work really nice, and other times they behave a little erratically, in my opinion. What do I mean by that? Like you might start up your emulator and you'll notice on the home screen some of your app icons are missing, or some of the text under the icon, like the icon label doesn't appear. Or maybe you launch a keyboard and the keyboard pops up, but none of the letters are appearing. That weird behavior can sort of be fixed by doing one of these two things. Wipe data will essentially wipe all user data from the emulator, so anything that you've installed on the emulator will be gone. And I think it sort of does like a factory reset, and then you can just re-upload the app you're working on and test it, and that seems to work. For fixing issues. Cold boot, what this does is when we launch our app, it loads from a save state. So whatever you were currently doing in your emulator before you last closed it down, it will load from that state, which is kind of nice, right? Because it kind of picks up where we left off, but it does, I think, cause some of that erratic behavior. What a cold boot does is it turns the emulator on as if it was off. So it'll start it up, as if it was off. So I don't know, I'm going to do a launch this emulator right now. So I'm going to launch my emulator. You should launch your emulator. We're getting this start AVD here. I do apologize. So there, look at that. My tablet popped up nicely. When I said these emulators are a little resource intensive. When I'm running Android Studio, when I'm running an emulator, and when I'm running my screen recording software, OBS Studio, all 3 of them, I do notice a little bit of lag here. So with this emulator running, you might see, a little bit of lag in my video, and I apologize for that. So one of the things that I'm going to do to fix that is I'm going to use a physical device, and then we'll talk about that in our next video for the purposes of this course. Okay, so I think that's going to work a little bit better here. So now you see the tablet has booted up. If we talk about over here, we have a nice little sidebar we can close the emulator here with the X. We can power it down. We have volume rockers up and down. We have orientation, so you can change the orientation of the device device. And when we change the orientation of the device, you're going to see there's a little icon over here. We also then have to click that little icon to change the orientation of the application that we're looking at. We can take pictures with the camera. It's not like a real camera. It presents you with like a virtual room or a virtual selfie, which is pretty cool. And then we kind of have like our control buttons, right? Like our back button, our home button, and then what's this one called? Our overview button, which will open up like all of the launched apps. So as your device is booting up for this first time, it might be a little slow. It might be doing some like updates or getting some files in line on the back end. So we'll let it take its time here. Okay, so it's going, it's going, it's going. Hopefully this won't take too much longer. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So the pixel is starting. And what we should see is we'll be presented with a really nice, virtual device here. Again, I might be getting a little lag right now in this video because my computer's just doing too much. You shouldn't get the lag if you're not running screen recording software. You should be fine. I don't get this lag when I'm not running my screen recording software. So here's my tablet, right? I can swipe up and I should be able to see a list of apps. So here they are. I don't know. Let's open like the clock. So I can open the clock. The clock should open up. Here it comes. So that's kind of nice. I can do an orientation. So I'm going to rotate the orientation, and you'll see there's going to be a little icon I have to click to change the orientation of the app. So there's the screen orientation, and then there's the icon right here. I'm going to click that, and by clicking this, it should change the orientation of the app. And there we go. Okay, so now that orientation is changed. So what do I mean by this like cold boot, right? So right now you can see we've changed the default orientation of the tablet and we have an app up. So I'm going to close this out. And so when I close this out, it says saving state here. Okay, so when I launch this emulator again, it's going to try to load from that save state. So let's see, I'm going to launch this. And hopefully it should launch a little bit quicker now, right? Because the stuff has already been done. We've already kind of perfect. So right here, right, you see the tablet is oriented horizontally or in landscape mode, and the clock is open. So that's how that works. However, if I do a cold boot, and you can see, look, a little bit of strange behavior, like the clock already just like disappeared. I don't know why that just happened. If I do a cold boot, so let's just check down here. If I do a cold boot, so let me close this out. All right, so it's saving its state. And so now if we do a cold boot of the tablet, what's going to happen? Well, it shouldn't load from that save state. It should just do its default thing. And that's exactly what happened, it looks like. Perfect. So the orientation is back to normal. It says cold boot requested by the user. And we're going to be turning this on, for the first time. All right, so that works pretty nicely here. So I'm actually going to close out of this right here. So we're going to close out. All right, it's saving its state. That's fine. I'm going to close out. Yeah, I killed that process. That's okay. And I'm going to close out of the ABD manager here. So now we've got a device made, and again, you can go back and create some more virtual devices. You can see if I look here, right here is my deploy list for my targets. I've got my 4 right here. So how do we run our app on this virtual device? Well, we have to click the right device that we want to test it on. So if I want to load it on the Pixel 2 or 3 or 4 or my Pixel C, which is my tablet, I'll click my Pixel C, and then I just simply click this little green button. So if I click that green button, we should see our layout, which is right here. It says Hello World. It should load up onto our tablet. So let's check this out. All right, so I'm going to load it up. We're launching the device. It might take a little bit of time, but hopefully not too much here. It's the Gradle build is running, and we'll talk more about what the Gradle is in the future, but we want to just make sure like this, everybody is at the same, place in the beginning. We've got the software installed. We've got working devices that we can test on. So if you don't have an Android device, don't worry. You can use one of these physical devices, and it should work, pretty good for you, depending on what type of emulator you want to run. If you have a physical device, it also should work pretty well. I will say this though, with the physical devices, I have a couple of, older like Android like track phones, which are like a cell phone carrier here in the United States, and I think I got them from like Best Buy for like $25. A couple of them work. nicely with Android Studio, and a couple of them are not recognized. So sometimes the devices will work and sometimes they won't. So all right, it says waiting for all target devices to come online. Let's see, my device is hopefully going to come online soon, and then I think it's going to install my app nicely here for us. And again, I do really like these virtual devices, but for the purpose of our course, I think I'm going to use a physical device just because the screen recording, it allows me to get better results with the screen recording. All right, so the Pixel is starting, and if you remember, we had cold booted last time, so this had to go through all of those, this startup again to install the app, which it says it is installing right now. And let's see. In the future, right, moving forward, this process hopefully shouldn't take as long. So if you're sitting there going, oh my God, what do I have in store for me with this course? We're going to spend a minute just launching our apps. That's not going to be the case every time. So there we have it. There is our app, Hello World, and it says Hello World right there, which is kind of cool, right? We're running it on the device. If I click home and we back out of this and I swipe up, we can see the Hello World app right there, and we can launch it. Okay, so there we have it. Our virtual emulated device. I think this is a great place to stop. We should all have a device up and running. And if you want to, you can go create a few more. In the next video, we'll talk about physical devices. I'll see you then.